Welcome to the Disrupting Obesity podcast. I'm Charlotte Skanes, and I'll be sharing ways to regain control over your body and lose an extreme amount of weight naturally. Being fat is about so much more than just the food. It's about your relationship with food. That means that dealing with your weight is about more than just the food, too. You have to change that relationship. You have to start disrupting obesity. I'm all about making things easier. It's a massive part of my entire objective with this podcast. Losing weight is hard. The toxic diet industry deliberately muddies the waters as much as it can to keep it hard so that you keep trying and failing again and again, and they get to make billions of dollars each year. That's why I'm here. I was already pissed at the overall weight loss landscape. I was in the not unique position of having lost a boatload of weight. I kept it off for almost a full decade, but then I had to lose more than half of it again. And when I looked around, things had not gotten better since the first time I lost my weight at all. They were worse, a lot worse. I lost 201 pounds on my own before social media. So when I had to do it again in a world with social media, it was like all the garbage and horse shit advice had been magnified and it was everywhere. And then I'm sitting here and I almost died and I came through that and I lost my weight again and I'm looking around and it feels like everybody's being lied to. It still feels like that a lot of the time. And I'm just sitting over here now screaming into the void and hoping it's helping as many people as I can. It feels like the toxic diet industry is deliberately muddying the waters so it can sell you stuff while simultaneously making you feel really bad about yourself. Both of those things are huge problems, and I hate them both. But at their core, both issues, the part where they deliberately confuse things when it comes to weight loss and the part where they make you feel like shit about yourself, both come back to them making it harder for you to lose your weight. The harder it is, the less likely you are to succeed, and your weight loss win is the diet industry's loss. So I totally get why they do it. I just hate it at the same time. It's not right to only give people a few pieces of the puzzle. It's not right to make things harder than they need to be. So when I was coming up with my list of 9 things I wanted to talk about, ways to make it easier was a no-brainer. I can't make losing weight easy for you. I can cut through a lot of the noise and the bullshit and simplify things for you easier. I can make it easier. And so can you, but I can't make it easy. Nobody can make it easy. Nothing makes it easy. Not surgery or shots or pills. There's no easy road with this. Here's the thing. You don't want it to be easy. And that's not a punitive thing. This isn't even exclusively a weight loss thing. It's a life thing. We do tend to learn more when things aren't handed to us. We are less likely to repeat our mistakes and our harmful or toxic patterns if we had to work even a little bit harder to repair them. From the time I was about 2 on, my dad would say that if there was a hard way of doing things, I would find it. So I'm coming from a place of deep experience. I'm the person who misses the obvious solution and finds a roundabout or just a different way to get to the same place, which I think has kind of been useful for my overall perspective. This week, I want to share 9 ways I've found that make this whole weight loss thing easier. Some of them are pretty superficial, and some of them are working on a deeper level. They're more of a mindset thing. Our first one today is predominantly a surface thing. I mean, there's always mindset stuff going on too with pretty much everything that I talk about. But this one is super tangible and it's very concrete when it comes to weight loss advice. Measure once and take a picture. Tracking calories isn't fun. That's not what I'm selling. And we've seen dozens of variations on trying to make calorie counting fun or to disguise it by calling calories something else, turning them into points or colors or just different numbering systems. I'm aware that tracking calories can really suck, and I fully acknowledge it too. My accountability to you on this one is that focusing on making it easier, making it as palatable as possible will help, and I want to show you how. Measure once and take a picture is in the same category as tips as building out recipes in your tracking app so that you're, not re-entering individual ingredients all the time. Building out meals so you can group your breakfast bagel and your oatmeal and the coffee that you have every morning and then enter them all with just a couple of taps on your phone. This is one of those front-loaded jobs. You have to do the work up front to reap the rewards later. I know you want to track your calories accurately. Otherwise, what's the point? You don't want to waste your time. Cool. I don't either. Do this now and save yourself a bunch of time later. It's the later part that's critical to focus on. Sure, you're all fired up now and you're ready to go. But if you've tried to lose weight before, you already know that initial enthusiasm is going to wane. If you've done something now to make things easier later on because you're saving yourself time, you're more likely to keep going. I want you to keep going. This is one way you get to set yourself up to succeed later. Take the things you eat often and measure them out. Measure your usual helping of cereal and put it in your usual bowl. Take a picture of it. Now you know for next time. When I fill the bowl 2/3 of the way with Count Chocula, it's 280 calories. Next time, I've got something I can reference. I get that if you're having to weigh and measure every single little thing, you're probably going to go nuts. Most people don't need to do that. This podcast is here for anybody struggling to lose weight, but a huge part of my overall mission is that I'm creating space for people who have a lot of weight to lose, which sometimes causes a lot of confusion, and it does lead to some situation with some Gladyses. But there's a massive and largely unacknowledged difference between losing a lot of weight and losing a little bit. I know a lot of the same principles apply. Totally got it. But starting out with 2,600 calories is very different than starting out with 1,400. There's a lot more wiggle room. And this is truly just the most surface issue when it comes to the differences between losing 80 pounds and losing 15. The more calories you have to play with, the more often you can eyeball what you're eating. If you're eyeballing it and you're still losing weight, just keep going. You might as well do some measuring and picture taking now, though, so that you're not playing catch up when you hit that point. And maybe you won't. But let's say you're down to your last 15 pounds and the weight just isn't budging anymore. The first thing I'm going to ask you is how accurately you're tracking. Then I'm going to ask you how sure you are that you're tracking accurately. How often are you weighing your food? Save yourself some heartache later and get used to what your typical portions look like now. Sure, the box of crackers says that one serving is 200 calories. Cool. They also say that's about 13 crackers. Okay, but what does it look like? On its own, in the bowl, in the tub that you'll put them in for your lunch bag. Visuals are powerful. You want to get to know what your food looks like, really looks like. But please know that I don't really believe that weighing and measuring food is necessary on a daily basis when you're losing weight. I didn't have to weigh or measure my food when I started either time. The second time I lost weight, I hit the point where I wanted to, but that was just so that I could lose my weight as consistently as I could. I just wanted to be done with it. Tracking what you're eating, honestly, is totally doable without weighing and measuring food. But, and it's a big but, I try really hard to only use that word when I mean it, because I heard in like a TED talk or something that but is like a great negator. People automatically forget what you said right before it. It just erases it. I love you, but that was awesome. But we only remember the part that comes next. So yeah, tracking is doable without weighing and measuring food, but you really have to be aware of what your portions actually look like in caloric terms. Accurate tracking doesn't look like eating the Count Chocula and then grabbing the box and going, well, a cup's 140 calories. I'm pretty sure I had about a cup. So I'm going to go with that. And then continuing to always assume that every time you have Count Chocula cereal, you had 140 calories worth. When people come to me and they're like, I'm tracking everything, but I'm not losing weight anymore. A lot of the time, it's because they're doing stuff like this. It's mistakes like this that lead to quote unquote plateaus. And they're one of the hardest things for me to break through when it comes to belief systems. because the reality is that it was 2 cups of cereal or a cup and a half or a cup and 2/3, whatever. The problem is that we're talking about up to 140 calories that are totally unaccounted for. So you're going to think that you've still got them to play with. Repeat this behavior enough times over the course of a day, and your deficit could be out the window by the middle of the afternoon. Your brain is always going to want to err on the side that you had less. It's very rare for people to assume that they had more than they did and enter too many calories. Your brain wants you to genuinely believe that you only had a cup of cereal, because when that's the case, you have more calories left. You can eat more. You've got to be aware of this. Push back against it. Push back on this concrete surface level of figuring out your actual portion so you've got a handle on the calories, and push back on the abstract level because of how important this is for your mindset and your overall relationship with food. Doing things proactively is amazing for your mindset and your overall relationship with food. Knowing that you're doing something right now that will make things easier for you in the long run feels amazing. It helps you keep doing what you're doing now, and it's helping you out later on. Those are some pretty significant mindset wins. Here's another way to keep that train rolling. Track repeat foods in the morning. Today is all about making things easier. That also means some of these tips are probably going to be less than popular. This might be one of them for you. And it's all good if it is. Not all of these are good fits for everybody, right? Some of them are great for people who thrive on being organized. And sometimes it's even more helpful for people who aren't super organized and don't feel like they thrive on being organized. That's a whole other thing, though. If you can save yourself time and frustration, you're more likely to keep going, to not give up. When you have foods that you eat on repeat, stuff that you eat or drink every day, maybe you have a snack mid-morning or before bed, a little something in the late afternoon to tide yourself over until dinner. Cool. Track it in advance. Track it in the morning and spend the day acting like those calories are already gone, because they are. You know you're going to have a couple of Oreos on your break, so you might as well track them with your morning coffee. By acknowledging that you're going to have them, you're increasing your awareness for the rest of the day, and you're being accountable too. Accountable to your daily calories, accountable to the commitment you made to yourself to get your weight under control. But it makes planning your day out so much easier, because you're not going to hit the end of the day, be ready to grab that snack that you need to have every night for your blood sugar, or just because you really want it. And then you realize you don't have any calories left because you went over with lunch, right? That is setting yourself up to fail. But if you tracked your snack cookies first thing that morning, your app would show those cookies as spent. They're gone. So when you were getting your lunch sorted out, those calories weren't even an option. They're just not available to you. Plus, there are all those mindset benefits that we were just talking about in the last segment, right? You're being proactive. I know it's a lot more short term than doing something today that's going to help you out way down the road. This tip is about doing something this morning that's going to help you get through today. It's a shorter road, but it's the same destination. You keep going. That's the destination. Keep going. The apps aren't set in stone, Gladys. I'm not sitting here promoting disordered eating. You can enter something into your app and still modify it or delete it. You can change your mind. This is just a tool that you can try out to help you learn to balance your calories over the course of the day, right? Now, our first 2 tips today were something I like to call what issues. We're going to talk about that towards the end, but they're directly tied to what you're eating. Our third tip is a who thing. It's about the way your relationship with others impacts and influences your relationship with food. Don't buddy up. Weight loss isn't a team sport. It can feel like a really good idea to do this with your husband or your best friend, but I think we all know that more often than not, that doesn't go so well. I've done whole episodes on Saboteurs and Enablers. I did a 3-part series on it, starting with episode 27. And I've talked a little bit about what it's like when you try to do this with somebody else, and everybody has the best of intentions, and then the whole thing starts to fall apart. So I'm a big nerd. I like really nerdy things. And one of those things is Lord of the Rings. My dad read me the books when I was little. He started me on The Hobbit when I was 4. We went to see all but one of the movies together on opening day. We didn't see the first one together because we were both so nervous that the movies weren't going to be any good and that it would ruin the book for us. So Sean and I went on our own to the first one and then gave my dad the all clear and I took him. Just because we were obsessed with the movies too, right? So I am sorry if the Lord of the Rings reference that I'm about to use doesn't make sense, but I promise that in the context of this conversation, it will make sense, even if you've never read a word of it or seen a minute of the movies. So there's this thread, I think it's from Reddit originally, but somebody screenshotted it and then put that on Instagram. And it's a picture from the first movie. And the first person to comment goes, "The least realistic thing about The Lord of the Rings is that a team got together for a group project, decided everything in one meeting, and their plan worked." Okay. Then this super articulate genius goes, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit and just cut out the hardcore Tolkien jargon here for you. But he goes, "The group abandoned the original plan, split up several times. Some group members started looking into different projects, found new partners, and ended up doing something else. The original plan was abandoned early on, and the project was salvaged at the last moment by the one group member that didn't get sidetracked." Sounds like a pretty astute description of teamwork to me. Okay, I'm sharing all of that with you because I hear that list and I think, yeah, every single one of those reasons is a reason weight loss isn't a group project either. It isn't designed for teamwork. Now, that's a different thing from support. Support isn't essential, but it's an amazing thing to have, particularly from the people closest to you. But when you hinge your accountability to another person's journey, you're asking for trouble. Have you ever heard the expression, "a camel is a horse designed by a committee"? Yeah, that one applies here too. Your relationship with food and with your weight is complicated enough without trying to reconcile them to someone else who's trying to repair their relationship with food and with their weight. You know that swimming metaphor I keep using when it comes to losing weight? Okay, actually, it kind of illustrates my whole argument for small incremental changes as the single most effective strategy out there. But I like to say that you don't teach someone how to swim by loading them into a boat, going 5 miles offshore and chucking them in. It's not a great strategy. Well, what do you think happens if you take 2 non-swimmers, load them into a boat, and chuck them into the water together? They can cheer each other on all day, but I'm not sure anybody's making it out of the water. This is your journey. It's your body. It's your weight. And I'm sure Kathy from The Office is great, and it's very sweet of her to offer, but how about no? Support? Yes. Buddy system? No. You need to learn how to be your own best support system. You have to be it for yourself. Now, something else that you have to do for yourself is to figure out your eating window. The more I talk about this, the farther I want to distance this conversation from the term intermittent fasting. And I know I really can't do that because it's shorthand right now for this whole concept. But I feel like it's kind of misleading and it makes some people shut down. If you're one of those people where as soon as you hear intermittent fasting, you start to tune out, try to think of it in terms of eating windows. How long is your eating window? During how many hours each day do you eat? When I was losing weight, I ate between 6 p.m. and like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So my eating window was about 8 hours and my fasting window was 16. So in intermittent fasting terms, I was doing a 16-8. I like the number part of IF. It's the rest of the baggage that I'd like to shed. Another reason to focus on your eating window is that there are almost as many intermittent fasting variations as there are weight loss supplements on the market. Don't worry about them. I'm not a huge fan of most of them, honestly, especially the ones where you have to go a whole day or several days without eating anything. I'm not a fan. We're trying to keep desperation at bay here, not stoke the fire up. It's important that you figure out your window. even if you have absolutely no intention of ever intermittent fasting. That's cool. Fine. You don't have to do it. But I do want to reiterate that every single person intermittent fasts anyway. Even the people who eat in their sleep aren't eating the whole time they're sleeping. Everybody's got windows, an eating one and a fasting one. I think it's really important that you figure it out because it's a really important mindset component. There's something about awareness with this one. There's something about the shame we feel with regard to how much time we spend eating. You want to change your relationship with food? Start digging into your windows. Dig into the beliefs behind them, the feelings behind the amount of time you spend eating. I want you to 3A weigh this one. I know that I pretty much want you to 3A weigh everything, but this one for sure. You need to know what your eating window looks like now. And remember, nobody's grading papers here. I don't care what your eating windows look like, but I do understand the shock and shame that can come with awareness on this one. I really can. When I was fat, my window would be open from basically the moment I woke up, rolled over, and cracked the can of cola on my nightstand right up until I went to bed at 1 or 2 in the morning. It was always open, except for when I was sleeping. It was more of an 8-16, 8 hours of fasting and 16 hours of eating. And that's only if I actually slept for 8 hours. I often got a lot less sleep than that. And to be clear, the cola broke my fast because it had calories. I know there's a thing where it doesn't count until you eat solid food. So not true. It counts. Your eating window opens as soon as you have anything with calories. That's how it works. If you're in a position like I was, where your eating window is basically as long as you're awake and you're looking at something like an 8-16-2, I strongly advise against flipping to a 16-8. Don't do it. And yeah, I did lose my weight with intermittent fasting, and I do strongly recommend it. But I think throwing yourself into the deep end is a bad idea. Small incremental changes are my jam with just less of it, and they're my jam with your eating window too. If you're eating for 16 hours a day, I would shave an hour off. Go to 15 hours. And there's a bunch of ways that you can do it. You might have to play with it. You can lob an hour off the morning, right? Or before bed. You can take a half hour off each. You can do 20 minutes and 40. I don't give a shit. I like to keep things as simple as possible, but you do you. Just start slowly shaving time off each end or one end. Maybe you're a night eater too, and you can lean into that. Maybe you're the opposite and your body does better if you front load your days with calories. You're not going to know until you start to play with it. Intermittent fasting wasn't a thing when I lost my weight the first time. I didn't know that that's what I was doing was called. There were no smartphones. I knew everybody thought I was nuts and that I didn't stand a chance of getting my weight off. We were still neck deep in the whole breakfast is the most important meal of the day hysteria thing, right? Everybody thought you should be eating a whole bunch of teeny tiny little meals all throughout the day to lose weight. But I'm a night eater. I want to eat at night, no matter how much I eat during the day. And good for you, Gladys. No, maybe I don't have any self-control. Or maybe I just have a different kind than you do. Because I did jump with both feet and I just said, screw it. I felt like I tried everything I could to lose weight. Nothing was working, mostly because I kept sabotaging myself at night. What if I only ate at night? What if I ate like everybody else, but I shifted it? What if I basically ate my 3 square meals a day, but I started at 6 o'clock at night? Well, the answer is I lost 201 pounds in just under 2.5 years. And no, that's not crazy fast. It was 1.55 pounds a week on average, but I kept it off for 9.5 years. So that's a solid pace. It's a sustainable pace. I'm not saying try intermittent fasting. I'm saying get to know your windows and maybe consider tightening your eating window up a bit. See what happens, not just how you react physically, but how it feels mentally and emotionally too, because it just might challenge some of the things you think you believe about yourself and your relationship with food. Another great way to start challenging your relationship with food and ultimately making this whole process easier is to see what happens if you switch your wheres. Where you eat matters. location has an impact on the choices you're making, sometimes in the very concrete and literal sense that it's dictating your food choices, and sometimes in the more abstract sense that your emotional connection to the location is dictating or impacting your food choices. And sometimes it's both. Something I suggest that clients try is that they switch up the spot where they're eating trigger foods, things that tend to make them lose control of their eating. It disrupts things. So let's say you always eat your chips on the sofa or in your favorite recliner by the TV. What would happen if you said to yourself, I'm going to have the chips today. I love chips. I've got the calories for it and I want the chips. Cool. But what if you had the chips on a chair in the kitchen? Now, here's what they tell me happens. They eat fewer chips, but they enjoy the ones they have more. Changing your where forces you to see things just a little bit differently. It changes your awareness of the chips and of yourself. Disruption is really good for your awareness. I know that where you eat isn't always within your control. That's true of a lot of things. But just because you can't, still try to make little changes when you can. I get that you have to eat your lunch at your desk or eat dinner at the table with your family or whatever it is for you. But there will be things that you can switch up. I'm not saying stop the Burger King runs. I'm saying no more eating it in your car like you always have. And maybe you have to start by just moving out of the driver's seat, switching over to the passenger side. That's still an incremental change. It's still something slightly outside of your usual routine and comfort zone. Where you eat doesn't just sometimes dictate what you're eating. It can dictate how you feel while you're eating it. The whole car eating thing is probably a good example. Car eating can have a lot of feelings that come along with it. Eating in the car can feel shameful because you're hiding, or it can feel exhilarating because you're hiding. It can feel like you're getting away with it or like you're failing. And the more of those feelings you feel, and the more often you feel them, the more likely it is you're going to feel them again when you're eating in your car next time. And you can take the word car out of everything I just said and swap in bed or park bench by my house or the downstairs bathroom, the laundry room, the closet. Doesn't matter. Just try. Switch up a couple of key things and see what happens. You might be surprised. Emotional eating is a huge thing for a lot of us, and quite often it ties back to why you're eating in the first place. So this next tip is about a concept I call CRC. And I included comfort, reward, and cope in today's episode because I want you to keep them on your radar. Be aware that if you're emotional eating, it probably ties back to one of those three things. And all of them can be tied to positive or negative emotions. I coped with being happy by stuffing my face all the time when I was big. I rewarded myself in negative ways. Oh yeah, that's a thing. Positive feelings can bring up negative emotions. I felt sad for feeling happy. I felt guilty for feeling joyful. It's been 15 years since I lost the closest person to me. And there absolutely have been moments where I felt guilt tinging the joy, when sadness started nipping at the heels of bliss. Feelings are complicated, little fuckers. One can lead to another, and you can't always control or predict which way they're going to go. The flip is also true. Moments of grief can also lead to happy memories, like when a song comes on and I get so caught up in missing her that it's just like the first days and weeks and months after she died. But that can turn into a memory that makes me smile. When you're caught up in overeating, ask yourself what's going on. Comfort, reward, or cope? What kind of patterns can you see, and how can you disrupt them? Because you can disrupt them. To stop myself from binging right after she died, I would take super long baths. I would still bring food in with me, but I also knew I was too lazy to dry off and go get myself more and come back. So I got out of the bed, I changed my location, and disrupted the pattern that I was caught in. If you want to change your relationship with food, you have to see it for what it really is. What role are the emotions behind your food choices playing in your overall relationship with food? How are you using food to comfort, reward, and help yourself cope? What's actually going on when you're headed back to the fridge for the third time in the last hour? While you're building awareness on that one, you'll also be making your life easier if you acknowledge guilt and shame spirals. Okay, I know that this one might sound a little abysmal, but I promise it's helpful. Maybe these aren't a thing for you. And if that's the case, that's awesome. But here's what a guilt and shame spiral looks like for me. So I'm feeling bad about myself for whatever reason. Usually it was something to do with a bunch of food that I told myself I wasn't going to eat, but I ate it anyway, or something to do with how I felt about my body, the way it looked, the way it moved and didn't move, the way it was limiting me and my choices. So I'm feeling guilty or shameful or both, just generally beating myself up maybe, usually because of food or something food related, like my weight. And to deal with that, I start eating, which makes me feel worse about myself, the situation, my body, just generally. To deal with feeling worse, I start eating, which makes me feel worse about myself, which makes me eat more, which makes me feel worse, which makes me eat more. Guilt and shame spiral. That's what it looks like. Feel bad, eat. Feel worse, eat. Feel bad about that, eat. Around and around it goes. It's a snake eating its own tail. You can't change what you can't see. I'm betting that this is a pattern you might just recognize from your own relationship with food. If that's the case, congratulations. It really is a good thing that you can see it. That's awareness sorted. But if you're going to deal with it, you need to acknowledge it's happening now that you can see it. That's how you're going to interrupt the pattern, to disrupt it. Guilt and shame spirals don't necessarily feel good, but their hidden danger is the way that we kind of like them, because ultimately they lead to more eating, and that's why they're such an effective trap. A lot of the time with this one, just seeing it is enough. And I don't mean recognizing it generally as a concept that impacts your life. I mean seeing what's going on while it's happening, while you're midstream with the whole feel bad, eat more, feel worse, eat more spiral. And when it's not enough, turn back to our last segment and interrupt the process by asking yourself what emotion you're feeding and why. Ask yourself if you'd rather try to disrupt the pattern by doing something different this time, even only a little bit different, or you'd rather stay stuck, because you know you can do this. I'm not asking for massive sweeping changes across the entirety of your food landscape. I'm asking for small incremental changes across a few different things, doable things, little wins you can recognize and use to build yourself up instead of the spirals that used to tear you down. Here's a little thing, something you can do right now, today, with zero heavy lifting, just a smaller plate. Now, this is a crazy concrete tip. It doesn't get any more literal than this one. If you use a smaller plate, you'll eat less. You won't believe the difference a couple of inches can make. On average, when people switch from a 12-inch plate to a 10-inch plate, they eat 22% less. That's a big deal. And that's an average. That means there are people who are even higher than that number. The fuller your plate looks, the fuller you feel. And this works with bowls too, and cups. I love the sight of an overflowing fruit nappy. So sure, yeah, you are playing a trick on your brain, but your brain's doing that to you all the time anyway. And even when your brain is in on it and knows exactly what you're up to, this still works. It can't help itself. You can probably see why this tip could have been on my 9 favorites list. You can't help yourself. Just give it a try. Take the same amount of food and put it on the 2 different size plates. It doesn't matter which shape they are. The smaller plate looks fuller and it feels fuller too. That's the big thing. Now, another tip like this one that I teach in my How pillar of the program is up next. And I'm going to give you the broad strokes of it almost as quickly. Put the taco down. Now, you've likely already heard this put another way or a different way, but what I'm referring to sum it all up in a great big hurry before I break it down, I'm referring to the way your hands should be empty while you chew. Now, I realize that's not everybody's favorite thing to hear, but I'm going to stand by it. Your hands should be empty while you chew every time. Put it down. Whatever it is that you're eating, however you're eating it, set it down between bites. When I did the second episode in this series, my 9 favorite weight loss tips, the first thing on that list, and not by accident, the first thing on that list was the 20-minute rule, which is the only quote unquote rule in my entire program. I don't like rules. They shut people down. And this is really just a science thing. I'm not going to go into it again, but broadly and very briefly, it takes your stomach 20 minutes to tell your brain that it's full. So slowing your eating down is going to help you get to the point in time where you can actually hear the signals that your body is sending. The more time you can add to your meals that don't involve eating, the better off you're going to be. Put it down. The fork, the sandwich, the spoon, the slice of pizza, the chicken wing. I don't give a shit what it is, but your hands should both be empty while you're chewing. There's a boatload going on here. A huge part of this is the concrete part about adding time so that you actually have a chance to start hearing your body tell you that it's full. But I think for a lot of us, an even bigger component is the more abstract side, the mindset side. I used to eat like it was a full-time job I was desperate to keep. I love food. The more calorie dense, the better. Consciously choosing to slow down was a very big deal for me. Sitting there focusing on the food in my mouth rather than the food sitting on my fork waiting to be eaten was a big shift. The more attention you pay to the food you're eating, the more satisfied you're going to feel. The more satisfied you feel, the less you feel like you need to eat. Put the taco down. Spend the time thinking about the food that's in your mouth. I get how that sounds. I do. But I'm saying it for a reason because it isn't an obvious thing to everybody. It wasn't an obvious thing for me. And it's okay if it wasn't obvious to you either. I loved focusing on the next bite. I have a whole best bite thing, and I'm not alone on that one either. The best bite, though, it's the one in your mouth right now, except for the middle of the sandwich. That's always the best bite. But seriously, though, the best bite is the one in your mouth right now. You need to be consciously increasing your overall satisfaction as much as you possibly can. This week's episode is a good example of how my program works. The only one of my pillars, I have 7 of them, and the only one that's missing is what now? And that's where I spend 12 full weeks teaching you how to get all the way to your goal weight and then how to stay there. But since I'm doing an entire episode in this series of 9, specifically on maintenance mode, I didn't include those kinds of tips in this particular episode, but pretty much everything that we've talked about today applies to maintenance mode as well. But all of today's tips, all 9 of them, are from the first 6 of the program's 7 pillars, but they're all connected to each other too, and there's overlap. The second tip on our list, for example, connects to the third tip. Doing things like tracking repeat calories in the morning is going to increase your awareness of your eating window and the way that you're balancing your calories off across your day. Challenging your relationship with food is like untangling a big knot. The strands are connected. Some of them are touching. They're twisted around each other. I developed the program so you can see the individual strands and the ways that they're intertwined, but you can't take it all on at once. So I broke the relationship with food knot into 7 main strands, things that you're already familiar with, a way of looking at a problem that you might have learned in grade school. When I started trying to untangle the knot so I could explain and teach other people the way I lost my weight and kept it off and changed my relationship with food, I realized that I could divide my answers and advice into the categories of who, what, when, where, why, and how. It was the perfect framework to hang my program off of. With today's episode, I've shown you the way I pull those threads apart. Each of our questions falls into the sphere of one of the program's pillars. Our first two questions are what issues? They're explicitly dealing with the concrete side of food, what you're eating. What is the first of my pillars? Because if you can't get a handle on the food itself, start understanding calorie management, you're going to be in trouble in a hurry. When we talked about buddy systems, I was talking about a who problem and looking at the way other people can impact your choices and your relationship with food. Our chat about eating windows is the type of thing I cover in when, but the program actually has a full system I developed to show you how to find your ideal eating window and learn how to move your calories around so you're the most satisfied overall. We took a brief look at where when we talked about switching up the place you eat and learning to look at the impact your location has on your choices. Comfort, reward, and cope, and guilt and shame spirals, those are why issues. And they're both things that we look at many, many times over the course of the program's 53 weeks and 803 separate module segments. Our last two segments today were concepts I cover in the how pillar. These are just really quick looks at them, but it gives you an idea of the overall principle. My time here feels so limited sometimes, and I get asked about the difference between the things I talk about here and the things I teach in my program. The podcast goes into 10, maybe 15% of what I cover over the course of my program's 53 weeks. So it's a pretty big difference. But when I'm on here, I have to try and make sure that it's accessible to anybody at any point in their journey. Whereas the program is a progression, it's a system. And if that's something you want more information on, you can find it on my website, disruptingobesity.com. And please don't forget that there are free resources for you too. There's my webinar coming up later this week on Wednesday. I'm going to be giving away a new set of tools that I created to help you with the two of the biggest steps that you can take right now to start losing the weight and change your relationship with food. I've never done this before, but I wanted a chance to talk to you guys in real time, answer your questions, and just help simplify things, make weight loss easier for you. If you're hearing a replay of this episode, not to worry. There is still going to be a replay of the webinar, and it's still going to be free. And so are the tools that I'm giving away. I'm not going to put them behind a paywall. So just reach out and I'll make sure that you get a copy. While you're on my website, though, you can find links to my books too, the weight loss workbook and my cookbook. Next week, we're coming back and we're going to take a look at 9 ways to keep yourself going. And we're going to run the gamut. I can't wait to see you then. Thank you so much for being here. Keep trying, keep tracking. Don't be intimidated and don't give up. You've totally got this. Thank you for listening to Disrupting Obesity with Charlotte Skanes. If you know it's time to take back control, lose the weight, and keep it off, reach out to me privately with a direct message on Instagram that says ready, so you can start disrupting obesity.